helping people live the lives of their dreams by becoming the person they always knew they were meant to become. And for me, I've seen so much pain and so much self-inflicted wounds from people feeling shame and guilt of being unworthy and feeling unworthy, whether it's in sales, which is super common in the world of high pressure comparison, with income and also with standings on the
Right.
leaderboard, to outside of sales. Everyone has this, it feels like heaviness of feeling like we're not enough. And either they're in denial of some sort or they're facing it and shit comes up, whether it's addiction or whether it's anxiety or whether it's temper. And really what I do is I work with people to help them identify the roots of where this comes from and why they don't feel like they're enough, and live a life that gives them joy and pride, where they can sleep well at night knowing they're doing all they can to become the best versions of themselves. And in going through that process, I've seen some incredible transformations with my clients and with my own life as well. And it really does bring joy to my heart to see people feeling good about themselves, not from what they're accomplishing, but for who they're being and how they're showing up every day.
And I appreciate you sharing that, because ultimately you started essentially helping software sales reps, right?
Yeah.
Is kind of where it started. And now it's transitioned to helping the individual tap into who they ultimately do want to become deep down, and helping them uncover, kind of that vision for their
That's right.
lives. Like, how did this transition happen for you? And why are you so excited and passionate about it now?
It's a great question. So I've always been very money motivated throughout my sales career. That's how
Okay.
I got to number one. I wanted to be very wealthy. I come from a background where, unfortunately, I didn't have that growing up. And I saw, it's sad, but my dad did not provide for our family. It was always my mom, and she had to take care of us. She worked multiple jobs, and my dad would bounce checks. And
Oh, wow.
he ended up dying when I was only 20. And while he did have a lot of great qualities, he was very loving and compassionate. He always struggled financially. He lost his business, big stacks of IRS bills unpaid. And I just remember thinking to myself from an early age, like, I don't want to be that. I want to
Right.
provide for my family. I don't want that financial hardship. So that was kind of the origin of my sales journey. As I got into sales because it offered an unlimited earning potential and other businesses did not. Originally, I was a teacher and it just didn't pay very well. So I pivoted to sales. Um, and, I spent most of my life chasing money. And I ended up getting to number one after, missing quota 3 years in a row. I got to number one at Salesforce when I did some massive shifts in how I showed up and how I sold. And I was so passionate about those shifts that I realized I need to teach this. I need to teach people the secret of how to sell in a way that is the opposite of what everyone else teaches. And that was what I started training people at Salesforce. I called it an inward to outward selling approach. Really, most sellers are focused on themselves, their commission, their money. And I was doing that, and it served me until I got to enterprise, where I actually missed quota 3 years in a row. And then I invested in a coach, I joined a mastermind, and I ended up changing how I sold to be outward focused, meaning my success was going to be a direct reflection of making my customers successful. And that became my focus, is really understand what success looks like to them and how they can succeed. And in doing that, I crushed it my last 4 years of Salesforce. Okay. And I made President's Club. I was able to retire from sales at 41. And during the last 2 years of those years, I got into addiction recovery. And I faced a lot of the demons because I had addiction in my family and because I had been putting so much pressure on myself. I ended up coping in a lot of unhealthy ways. So my addiction recovery gave me confidence that I can go out and do anything. If you can, stop with vices and behaviors. And I stopped all of it. I stopped, but the main thing was porn and sex. That was where I started. But then I took it to getting drunk, smoking pot, taking Adderall, video games, and every dopamine inducing vice that you could think of. And that became my superpower, right? It became this discipline and habits focus. And so ever since I started my program, I've always been coaching on habits and discipline and something I called addition by subtraction, which is taking away things that don't serve you so you can you can fill that space with things that do and that help you become the best. So it was never that I didn't teach this stuff or coach this stuff. It was more the marketing of how I positioned my business. Because I was the top guy at Salesforce, I could go and actually market that and say, hey, do you want to become the best seller? I mean, you were in my program, so
Right.
it's mindset, habits, and selling skills. It's not just selling skills. And so I started with this kind of trifecta approach of coaching the person. And what's happened is I've gotten now 3 years, 3.5 years away from being in the field selling deals. So all those selling skills are no longer as authentic or as applicable. The mindset, absolutely. The discipline, all day. You conquer those things, your sales are
100%.
going to skyrocket. It's a fact. That's where the biggest quantum leaps occur. But the actual deal reviews and multi-threading and what's happening in the market using AIs, fundamentally, these aren't things that I'm doing every day in the field. What I'm doing is I'm coaching. Okay. So what I am doing is I am working on myself. I am facing and continuing to face areas that I can improve, and I am helping a ton of people with coaching. And so the transition between coaching just deals and coaching, the individual is really, after coaching hundreds and hundreds of people, I found that the people that, get the biggest results are the ones that have this, what I call the work. It's everybody's got something that is holding them back from becoming what they're capable of becoming. For some people, it's addiction or vices or compulsive behavior. For others, it's anxiety and the feeling like you're not worthy. And the more that I coached, the more I realized and started to understand that when you do the work and find the one thing that's been with someone forever that they've been pushing aside, trying to skirt around, but never facing directly, the more you can identify that and help them with that, the more the sales just, it's like they're free. They have a lightness, a self-confidence, and an energy that ends up giving them this impossibly high belief system that they can go out and do anything. And from that belief system, they can go out and, call CEOs and book meetings or be very resourceful or attract people into their lives that actually can help them. It's a totally different way of working, but you can't get there unless you face yourself and go deep. And so a lot of times I've had to do this work in coaching, and it might take 6 sessions to get to the truth of what's holding someone back. I'll give you a perfect example. Yesterday, we were a guy coached for 2 years straight privately. And he finally, for the first time in his life, said, Ian, I feel ashamed. I don't feel, like I'm true to myself. I'm like, well, what are you ashamed of? And he's like, can you turn off the Fathom recording? And I said, okay. We turned it off, and he opens up and he says, I have a porn problem and I've never told my wife. And every time I do it, I feel like so ashamed. And then that affects how I show up with my family, my kids, and my work. And it's happening daily. And it was like, boom. And he's like, I've never said that before. I've never told anyone. It feels so good to get this off my, and then we could actually work on the solution. And it was like, boom. But it took him 2 years. So to live without shame, to live without any type of regret, to live without fear, to know you're the person you've always wanted to be, is not a 1-2 session thing. It is a gradual process. And when that happens, I call it popping. Someone pops. And so because I've been doing so much one-on-one, and because I've been doing so much personal development myself and getting to this point, I'm infusing and bringing that into my coaching. Whereas the sales stuff, I really am not focusing and doing anymore. So there's not as much relevant new content for me to work with and use. And so it feels much more authentic to me to really focus on coaching people that want the transformation in their lives and to break free of the chains they're putting on themselves. And so it's been a natural evolution. And interestingly, those are the people that end up getting the biggest results in the program, is when we have these breakthroughs, during my one-on-one sessions or during the live events, which are very focused on personal transformation and personal development. We call them masterminds. They're 2-day retreats where we go deep, tears are flowing, we do visualizations. And the magic happens, I found, in those events and in the live one-on-one sessions with me.
There's so much there. And what I hear to summarize this is the work that you do on yourself is the most important work that you're going to do, period.
Amen. It really is.
Right.
It really is. I am doing so much work on myself just this year, right? I've had 2 coaches. I'm in a men's group. I went to the Summit of Greatness. I met Goggins and Lewis Howes and Dr. Joe Dispenza. And And that's just getting started. I'm literally this whole week taking Rory Vaden's pressure-free persuasion course because I've gone back in the field. We're in our
Mm.
Q4, and I've gone back in the field to start selling again. It's
Oh,
been
it
a year
probably
and a
feels
half,
amazing.
and I'm like, yeah, it really does.
I
So
bet that fires you up.
I had 4 sales calls, and
Hmm.
2 have already closed at platinum, which is our highest level, and the
Yep.
third is I anticipate will close as well. So that's 75% at the highest possible tier. So I didn't do that accidentally, even though it's been a year and a half. It is
Hmm.
ingrained. It is like riding a bike. But the fact that I'm listening to hours and hours of training on a new approach, a B2C approach to sell and following and trying to get myself sharp, like that is the key, man. It's like always sharpening your saw. You've never arrived. And when I'm doing that, that translates to my energy. It translates to growth because when you're growing, you're able to take everyone with you and lead by example. So for me, now Tanvir is taking that, taking that same course. Now he has calls that he's watching me to see how it's done
Yeah.
on these one-on-one sales calls that I'm on. It's like it feels so good to be back in the field,
Mhm.
but mainly because I'm like getting better. I'm better than I was before when I was selling because I'm really going deep with everyone with these new tools to like get to the truth and figure out what they need and then offering them a solution. So it's pretty powerful, man.
There's so much that we relate to. And where I want to bring this back for the audience is going back to the 3 pillars of your program, because ultimately your story I resonated with, right? Your story. We shared a very similar lifestyle and what we did for career, work, aspirations, etc. But where I was drawn in was for the audience, I think is important to know is the 3 pillars, right? Which is mindset, habits, and then the career with selling, right? And the actual skill work. And where I think this is so applicable to anybody listening and watching this right now is the fact that the work that you do on yourself, the mindset, the habits, the transformation, like that is ultimately the work that will catapult anything that you're doing in life, whether it is your career, whether it's selling software, whether it's being a parent or a friend or a brother or a sister or a civilian in society, or you're training for a marathon or whatever it is, right? It's that work on yourself and the deep work, right? On your own personal journey. That is the hardest and most important work, because that is
Uh,
going back to your point, like that's getting back to the core of who you
it,
are and providing space
And
for you.
very, very, very few
Yeah.
people do
Yeah.
this work. I mean, I'd say maybe 5% of people are in
Well, it's scary.
the,
It's hard.
yeah,
It's
people are
uncomfortable.
in the rat race. They're in the, I go to work, I have my family, I watch my sports, I go to work, I repeat, kids get older, hopefully retire, like save money. Like it's not the way life can be lived if you're living a life of continuous growth and setting your goals to be um that of living like in my opinion we and I really believe this we could die at any moment, right?
Mhm.
And if we've been gifted uh gifts, right, whether it's charisma, whether it's resilience, whether it's parents
I
that
see.
that taught us lessons, whether it's being a white male, and unfortunately like that's the world we're in, like we're privileged in a sense to have opportunities that other people might not have, right? And it's you cannot take that lightly. John Barrows talks about that. We talked about that, right? In like I had my mom was a professor at UCLA. She worked her butt off. I had that example of hard work, right? That I was infused with. I also had my dad's example of addiction and losing his business and dying young that I didn't want to be. So it's like whatever happens, whether it's tragedy or whether it's triumph, right? It's happening so you can learn the lesson and become the best you're capable of becoming. And I just believe in my heart of hearts that life, you get one life. I don't know what happens after death, right? I don't. I'm Christian, but
Mhm.
I would love to know if there's a heaven or if there's a paradise or whatever, that I'm going there because of how I live my life. But that's not why I'm living this way. I'm living this way because I believe in this earth we have one shot and it goes by really fast. And if you're not pursuing the
Mhm.
life you want and living, more importantly, the
Mhm.
way you want, if you're not living your values, if you're not living in a way that's aligned with your best self, and you don't even know what that looks like because you haven't taken the time to define what is my best self look like, you're missing the boat. Because the joy that comes from growth and from conquering your vices and your bad habits and from climbing and becoming the best in your career that you can, to going on to new opportunities and entering the unknown, like life is an adventure, right? And I certainly, for my personality type and for, my goals and dreams, I don't want to sit on the sidelines and have life happen to me. I want life to be for me. So everything that happens to me, I believe, is part of God's divine design, and fundamentally is happening for a reason. And it's usually to redirect you where you're meant to go. And when you live it that way, it's like so refreshing. It's so easy, and nothing
It's easy,
is by
right?
chance.
It's easy because it flows, right? And it's authentic and it's
That's right.
genuine to who you are. And I
Yes.
just, gosh, like this in this conversation, I just feel called to, like, for anybody listening that is like thinking about something that you haven't addressed, right? And tackling that head on. Like, I just want to encourage somebody who's listening to this, like, whatever you're scared of, whatever you haven't addressed, whatever you haven't talked about with your significant other or yourself, right? Kind of like your client, you were just alluding to, right? Turning off to mention something that he's been sitting there and living in shame and guilt for over 2 years, right? There is so much power in getting something out of your own head and into the universe, whether that's writing it down or sharing it with somebody in confidence, but just putting it out there. It literally takes this idea that we think is so overwhelming, and it just belittles this thing, and then it's out there. And like, just like, I know, right? We've both been in our own programs of recovery, like the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, which I've gone through, right? Step 4 and step 5 were the scariest things I've ever done in my entire life. I said things to an individual that I always said I would take to the grave, until the day I heard, those are the things that will take you to the grave.
No.
And then I remember just bawling my eyes out. But like, Ian, what I can tell you, as I'm sure you can relate, is like, the scarier, the harder those conversations were to say, the more rewarding and fulfillment there was in the liberation of you and as an individual, right? The more freedom.
Yeah, it's interesting because your greatest source of shame is also your greatest superpower when you face it.
Mm. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Seeds of Success podcast. If you got to the end of this episode, can you please do me a huge favor and leave a 5-star rating and review? This helps me be able to reach out to bigger guests and also be able to get access to special events and activities that otherwise would not be possible without your support. So if you could please take just 3 seconds and leave a 5-star rating and review, it would mean the world to me, and I will see you on the next episode.